Cool. Yeah, Bill, we'll check it out when you get on.
Here we go. 3, 2, and let's see.
Silence your phone.
I'm telling you, I don't even. Hold on a second.
Jeez, what kind of operation is this?
All right.
You sure?
Yes, finally. Here we go. 3, 2, and 1. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool from the lower Antarctic region of Texas. Yeah, so
are you guys thawing out? I mean, seriously.
Seriously, it broke all the power's back on for the most part. We didn't lose power, thank God, but most of the state, half the state did. And yeah, it sounds like it's raining outside, but the sun's shining. But in the trees with the snow melting, it sounds like it's raining.
Yeah,
the gutters are going. We had like 6 or 8 inches of snow between our last episode and this one in Austin, Texas. Del Rio, Texas got 12 inches of snow.
Wow,
that's on the border.
Yeah, Del Rio.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we just got above freezing today after 6 or 7 straight days. So yeah, good to be thawing out. Heading into spring, hopefully.
Yep. You guys aren't.
I know it's colder. Yeah, I know it's colder in a lot of other places. It's just the houses are not built for it. The pipes are not buried as deep. Like all kinds of stuff. Just the trickle effect. It was crazy. So I think we're good. I'm excited today, man, for today's show.
Yeah, we've got a great guest joining us. I'll let you do the honors of introducing him. Today's topic, what's the topic? We're going to talk about writing story-based
emails out of thin air.
Just
make them up, that kind of thing.
That's right.
And some people will be like, I can't do that. But that's why we have a guest on today that's going to help kind of talk about how that happens. So, So I ran across this guy on one of those, those annoying Facebook ads that you get in your feed. He was running one of those, but it was really good. So I clicked on it, and then next thing you know, I'm on his list buying his product. I'm like, oh,
I was going to say, how often have you bought from those annoying Facebook ads? Because I can
more often than I can say. Care to admit, they say salespeople are the easiest people to sell.
That's right.
But yeah, it was really good, and I enjoy his emails. So I reached out to him, and I was like, hey, why don't you be on the show? And he said yes, because he didn't know what we do. So he was like, well, they've got a show. I'll be on it. He may regret the decision later. That's all right. That'll be a story for his emails.
That's right. Absolutely.
Why not to accept just any old podcast invitation?
Yep.
And then turn it into whatever he turns it into. So yeah, I don't have a lot of background on Bill other than he writes really good emails that make me want to buy stuff.
I got to tell you the copy, because I've went to his site over at Story Sales Machine, and we'll mention that again, I'm sure, before the end of the show, but really good copy. Outstanding copy from start to finish.
So why don't we I do believe Bill is going to bring a beer on with us. So why don't we just bring on Bill Mueller?
There we go.
With a round of applause, everybody. All right,
Bill. I love that shirt. Even though I don't drink Budweiser, I love that shirt.
You know what? I don't either. I'm wearing it out of irony and nostalgia.
There you go.
That's it. That's what sells these days. Nostalgia, right?
That's either like a well done graphic, the vintage look, or it's actually vintage. Which is it?
It's the fake variety, I think.
Okay.
I bought this years ago. I want to say it was in a thrift shop, but I don't think it's truly old.
Okay. That's all good. So welcome to the show. Welcome to Persuasion.
Yeah, thank you guys. Listen to a few of your episodes. I love what you're doing, and good to meet you.
Yeah. Cool. So what we usually do, Bill, is we kick off the show kind of talking about the beer of choice for each of us. And we'll let our guests go first. So I think you said you were going to choose between an IPA and a stout. So I've got my fingers crossed for one or the other. But
yeah, I'm aware that I've heard enough to know that one of you guys doesn't like IPAs.
Yeah, both of us.
Yeah, that would be both of us.
Oh, what's your problem with IPAs?
Just never really developed that taste for the flowers, drinking flowers.
Too sour. Yeah.
Right on. I do have a stout, so you'd be happy about that.
Awesome.
Yeah. And
nice.
I just, I was shopping yesterday for what I wanted, and I found a local brewery. All these words, talk about good copy. All the words on the label I liked. Mocha, stout, coffee, limited.
It's got all the keywords we like: coffee, mocha, espresso, chocolate.
What could go wrong? But this is from a local brewery called Black Raven. I'm in the Seattle area.
Okay.
And we discovered this brewery because you can YouTube this sometime. There's a crazy event that happens every day here. About 50,000 or more crows migrate from downtown Seattle to a town called Bothell, which is maybe 20 miles away. And they just gather in this one grove of trees every single day at sunset. And I guess at sunrise, they go back. And me and my wife go watch them sometimes. And so that happened to trigger our radar for Black Raven Brewery, which is only a few miles away. So we became fans. And next thing you know, I got a stout, day drinking with a stout.
I love it. Love it. So you're actually I think you're in Kirkland, right? Is that what I saw?
Yep.
Yeah. So one of my buddies, RC, who was on a couple episodes ago, he's right there in Kirkland as well. He's have to introduce you two guys.
Yeah, for sure.
So that happens every day. That's pretty interesting. Every day,
it's fascinating. I mean, when they come in, the sky is just black with crows. It's crazy. All in the span of about 20, 30 minutes. And they just nest in the trees. The sound is more amazing than the visual because on video, you can't really capture the visual that well.
Yeah.
But it's so compelling that people have filmed YouTube informational videos about it. I don't, completely understand it, but it's crazy.
Yeah, we just have bats here in Austin, but not every day. It's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 months out of the year. They come out from under the Congress Street Bridge, like 1.5 million bats at sunset. They go off, eat their bugs, and come back. Yeah, it's like everybody lines up on the bridge from, I think, August. I think that's when it starts, is like August. And it's crazy. Like, it's just like same thing. The sky just kind of turns black with bats.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. So... Well, let's see the label on that brewery, because that's how we judge beer. We just use the label. So
that's right. Creativity.
Yeah, StreamYard video is backwards.
There you go.
There you go.
Black Raven Stout. Oh,
Feather Weather Stout. I like that. Play on words there. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's a very like traditional kind of classical looking can. I like it.
Yeah.
So
we ask what's the alcohol content in that one? You may have mentioned it. I didn't.
I did mention it, so let me look for it.
You got to get it in the light like us old guys.
Yeah.
What's your reading glasses?
ABV. It looks like 6.8.
There you go.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
What are you guys drinking? Or am I drinking alone?
No, we're drinking.
Sean may be drinking whiskey. No,
not this week. No. So I've got another craft beer club, original craft beer club beer. So Zipline Brewery up in, where were they from? Lincoln, Nebraska. So this is our subscription service. That's our sponsor, Bill. So we talk about some of the beers. So you get a box of beer on your front porch like once a month. Pretty cool deal. And you can find out more at persuasionbythepint.com/craft beer. So this one is, like I said, from Lincoln, Nebraska, Zipline Brewery. It's a German style Kolsch. I don't know how to say that properly. Kolsch. All right. It's 5.4% ABV, 24 IBUs. Here's the copy on it. A refreshing ale that drinks like a lager. The Zipline German style Kolsch pours straw yellow in color with hints of honey malt character and a smooth, crisp finish. This easy drinking Kolsch is brewed with Magnum and Tatang hops, Pils and Munich malts, and local organic white wheat. So best enjoyed
Magnum
at 30.
Tatang.
Yeah. Best enjoyed at 38
degrees. Huh?
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff in there, right? Yeah, some of the combinations they put in here are pretty amazing. So this is basically a lager is what they're saying. So looking for, what do you got there, Jonathan?
I have a Totality Imperial Stout.
There you go.
From 50 Brewing Company.
50.
So this is a first for 50 Brewing Company on our show. We've never had their beer, so it'll be interesting to try it out.
Does that mean like half the beers are good and half are bad? It's a 50-50 shot. I mean, it seems like an odd name for a company.
So this is an award-winning Imperial Stout. It serves as the base beer for our international acclaimed barrel-aged Eclipse. Never had that one. Let's see. Rich dark chocolate, mocha, and espresso flavors. 9.5 ABV. So
yours is just fermented a little bit longer than Bill's, but it should be the same basic taste.
Sounds like. Ooh, it looks good. It looks.
Yeah. So y'all got the dark beers, and I've got the.
That was a bad pour on my part, but
yeah. All right. Well, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Oh, that's actually pretty good.
We'll let Bill go first. So, Bill, we have a rating from 1 to 5 pints, 5 being the best. And you can go you don't have to make it a whole number. We sometimes go point something, 1 point something, 2 point something.
1 decimal place, though. Don't get crazy.
This is a 4.5.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Very nice.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So you went straight to the bottle, so that's good. Must be good. So mine is actually surprisingly good. Like I was not expecting that at all. It does definitely have, it said hints of honey malts. Like I definitely get that a little bit of sweetness from it.
Yep.
This is really good. This will probably be my highest discolored beer ever.
For one that light. So what is it?
I'm going to give it a 4.75. Sorry, I went 2 decimal places.
4.75. Wow.
Yeah, it's good.
It's getting really exact.
It's really good. It's like what I would expect like a quality lager to taste like. I mean, it's just it's good. Very good. All right, Jonathan, what you got there on your Imperial?
I'm going to give this an even 3. It's a little it's good. I like the aftertaste is a little not to my liking. The initial taste is really good. It's not too sweet.
Yeah.
I love that coffee. I always love anything with coffee. We have coffee, espresso, chocolate, that combination.
Yeah.
It's really good, but it's kind of I don't know what the aftertaste is, but it's not so great. So I'll just keep drinking.
Yeah. Typically those stronger stouts, like as they kind of air out in the glass, I think they get smoother. Yeah.
It feels almost like it's almost like a Guinnessy aftertaste. So, but I like Guinness, but it reminds me of Guinness, but I don't like this aftertaste as much. So
keep drinking.
Yep.
All right.
I said it.
So, Bill, all right. Welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to this all week. And like I said, I got an email from you today. I don't know if you wrote that today or if that's part of a sequence, how to write the story-based email out of thin air. And it's about the roses, if that jogs your memories.
Yeah, that's a broadcast.
Okay.
It's not installed in an autoresponder.
Okay.
So
cool. I thought that was a good example of what I believe that you do, like just kind of the way you laid that out and how you came up with it and those kind of things. But before we get into that, kind of give us some background of how I always love hearing kind of the winding road that gets people into copywriting, and then direct response copywriting on top of that. So how'd you get from wherever to where you are today?
Basically, I started off in the world of small town journalism.
Okay.
So wore a few different hats there: reporter, editor, sports editor, columnist. So I banged around in some different small newspapers. I did some freelance newspaper and magazine writing, and got into copywriting. Basically, I helped. The first thing I did is going to show you how old I am. I was on AOL. All great stories start with I was on AOL.
Yeah.
I was teaching a class. Do you guys know what the Learning Annex is? I don't know if you have that where you are. It's it's an educational franchise where adult education.
Yep.
And I was teaching a class to seniors on how to write their memoirs.
Yeah.
And so I was on AOL, and AOL at that time, you had the ability to just email or message people based on keywords, the entire database. So I wrote this sales letter. I'm trying to rack my brain how I discovered how to write a sales letter, but I wrote a letter out to a bunch of seniors on how to write their memoir. And I actually got people to send me checks through the mail just on sending instant messages through AOL.
Wow.
So I was getting checks in the mail to help them write their memoirs. And that's when a light bulb kind of went on. And then a few years later, I helped a buddy of mine, one of my basketball friends, write a book, which turned into a full-time business for about 9 years, selling a multimedia program to basically classroom teachers who were having trouble with disruptive kids. So I learned all about internet marketing that way.
Sure.
Jim Edwards was one of the first guys I followed, him and Joe Vitale.
Mm-hmm.
Just learned a lot about direct response that way, and just kind of, learn that way. That was almost 20 years ago.
I was going to say AOL had to be what, 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Pre-tech wreck.
I think I hit the eject button on AOL in the maybe 98, 99. I can't let go of the email address because it's my name at AOL.com.
Sure.
And I can't get any other online property with just my name. So I've hung on to it for free, but
yeah. Wow. So to start out, so you had a little bit of a, I don't know, a knack, but you usually, if you go into journalism, you kind of enjoy writing a little bit. Is that true, or is that an assumption on my part? Incorrect.
That is an assumption. I enjoy having finished writing.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's just, I'm jealous of people that find writing fun.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm sitting down to write something that's like personal or fun, like say I'm writing somebody a letter, which doesn't really happen anymore, but I enjoy working with words, but I can't say writing is fun for me. But I like having written something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I totally get it. Especially paid writing, right? Because then the demons come out. Like if nobody's paying you for it, it's a lot easier. Mm-hmm. But if you either want it to be read, or you think it's going to be read, or you're going to be paid for it, the demons definitely come out at that point. So,
if I get a text coming in and I feel like I can write something in 2 or 3 sentences that just like really hits it, or an email, that's like fun for me. But
sure.
if I have to sit down and write some copy, I'm not saying it's not fun, but it's more of a chore, and it's work.
Is the chore starting, or is it like once you get going, do you feel you get in a pretty quick groove, or is it just?
Yeah, no, there is something to the fact once you get warm and into it. I liked what Hemingway said. Hemingway used to finish his day's work, he said, in the middle of a sentence, so that when he returned to it, he could return to it warm, so to speak.
Right.
I always kind of like that. Rather than finishing a full chapter, then you're starting from scratch and cold.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard the same thing. Like if you edit yesterday's work before you start writing, you kind of get those juices flowing as well. Maybe edit the last 2 or 3 pages. For some people that doesn't work because it's 2 different parts of your brain really edited.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm one of those people that does something that's not really recommended. I edit a lot as I go along. Everyone says, "Oh, just blow through the rough draft." I don't know if it's perfectionism. I have a hard time doing that. I've got one, the writing hand and the editor hand. The editor hand's got a hold on the writing hand, and
I think part of that is just word processor. You being able to use docs and things like that is just so easy to do that. Whereas before, if you had a typewriter, but even when I sit down and write by longhand every once in a while, because I just try to do something different, I still find myself like scratching out and starting over. So I guess I'm the same way. I edit as I go quite a bit.
It's tough when you've got that red line automatically that appears when you're writing.
Yeah.
Like,
wait a minute.
Yeah.
You got to correct that thing right away. It's so distracting.
Sean, you gave me something to think about. This is how old I am. When I got my first journalism job, I literally was typing away on a manual typewriter.
Yeah.
So you had to really think about what you hammered out before it, you could make changes after that, but, and maybe that's where it comes from. I also remember Tom Robbins, the novelist, who I guess is from up here. He basically wrote his novels in one draft. He would write one sentence, make sure it's perfect, and move on to the next one. I'm not that bad.
Wow.
Apparently all his novels were written, or so I once read, in one draft.
Wow. That's probably a long draft though, as far as like time to compile.
Yeah.
That seems to me that would just be painstaking. Kind of goes against what Anne Lamott talks about, and just kind of letting your writing flow out, and then going back and fixing it later. So interesting.
So how long did you write for your local, like these local newspapers? How long did you?
I did that. Probably about 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've been doing some type of direct response copy for, you said, like 20 years now.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're part of the old guard.
Yeah. Yeah.
These days.
So what's the biggest takeaway from that? Because I know, newspapers, you're always on a deadline. So would you say that, from your experience in the newspaper business, is that one of the biggest lessons or one of the biggest strengths that you take into copywriting, is just the fact that you've learned, that time that gave you those, you had those automatic deadlines that you had to meet. And I'm sure it's like coming out of the military. Sean and I would talk about, we've been out of the military for a long time, but there's still some things that are just kind of ingrained in our DNA from that. I'm sure as a journalist, there's some things that just automatically you bring to the table when you're a copywriter.
No, for sure. In fact, a deadline in journalism is a real deadline. I mean, back in the day, if I covered a game and I'm sitting in the press box, literally the truck for the printing press is waiting in the newspaper for your copy. Yeah. And there's people back in paste up that are doing their thing. The truck will leave without you if you're not finished. And there almost could be a hole in the paper if you don't finish. It's not quite that dramatic, but it's a real deadline. Whereas when you're doing work for clients, there's deadlines, and I take them seriously. But there's different kinds of deadlines. But that always stuck with me and probably did instill some discipline.
Yeah. And do you think, what else do you think is beneficial that you brought? So for me, my background was like, I've been in door-to-door sales, I've been in in-home sales. So obviously that translated to my copywriting experience. But what from journalism, what else did you take that you think helped you in the direct response world? Because a lot of guys are getting into copywriting and they don't have much background. They're getting in it because it's kind of the make money thing and the hot career opportunity and kind of that. What transferred really well from journalism to copy?
I would say the word that comes to mind is precision. You have to be precise, whether it's quoting somebody accurately, whether it's getting the right spelling of somebody's name, whether it's accurately describing a product. You have to get it right because there's people out there. I've had this pretty funny story. I wrote a story for the paper once. Roger Revell is a guy who basically is credited with inventing global warming. He was at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I was working for a paper in La Jolla, California at the time. And it turns out I made a mistake in the paper. I misquoted his wife, I believe it was, where I attributed a quote his wife said to someone else. He comes storming into the office, blows past the receptionist, dresses me down in front of all my colleagues. I'm in my early 20s. I'm blushing red as Christmas. And it just brings it home that when you write something for the public and it's out there in the newsstand and people are reading it, if you're wrong, you hear about it and it can have consequences. Yeah. So, was it Ezra Pound who said that the one sole morality of writing is fundamental accuracy of statement? Well, you got to be damn sure that the product you're writing about or the promise you're making has some accuracy to it because, there's some wiggle room in marketing. We all take liberties with the way things are phrased. But I guess I took that, to answer your question, I took that from journalism, that you've got to be precise and that words matter and facts matter and double check things.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because there's definitely some sloppy writing and citations and things like that these days, not just in copy and just in general, in media, everywhere. Yeah. So let's jump back to today, Bill. And kind of give me your description, or give the audience your description of what it is you do today as far as copy. You kind of narrowed down to your thing. How would you describe what you do today?
Oh boy. Well, right now my current project is really focused on email marketing, because I believe that email is still the best ROI, the money that's most left on the table still is email.
100%
so
agree.
Part of my product is I talk to people all the time. I talk to my customers a lot, and I still get this question all the time, guys. Hey, email, is that still really a thing? I mean, it's unbelievable. So many people that buy my product, they either have lists they've neglected or lists they don't mail at all, and they don't realize. I hate that phrase. It's like printing money, but that's the closest thing you can get to that hackneyed phrase of printing money, is by sending an email, making a good offer. It's still the most underutilized or underappreciated thing. Not to you guys, I'm sure, but so anyway, that's kind of what I niche down to. I've kind of written everything from sales pages, landing pages, and all kinds of things, but that's kind of what my focus has been lately. But I also help people, businesses, with their offers and funnels and copy in general. So
yeah, you told a story in one of your, I don't remember if it was in the sales letter or if it was just something else I was reading of yours. Because one thing people ask me, I know, because I've written some follow-up sequences and those kind of things, onboarding sequences. They're like, well, will this work for anybody? Any type of product. And you told a story about a guy who sold a medical product.
Yeah, it was wholesale drug urine cups. So This guy sold wholesale plastic cups that were sold to doctors and hospitals. And honestly, if this guy came to me before he bought my product, I might even, in that case, say, I don't know, give it a try. The product's got a guarantee. I'll be happy to refund you if it doesn't work.
Sure.
Yeah. Lo and behold, he goes, dude, I sent this email out. I got more responses back than I ever did before. People loved it. They want more. And so you saw the email I sent out to encourage people on my list. Like, look, if you think this doesn't apply to your niche, I don't care if it's e-commerce, you're a mortgage broker, whatever it is, stories resonate, email still works. If this guy can help sell wholesale drug urine cups, then this will work for you too.
That's amazing.
That's testimonial I got.
Yeah. So like, let's start breaking that down, because I think that's going to be hard for people to wrap their head around. How do you take just any given story? I mean, you sit down, you got to write your stuff. So this kind of goes back to the out of thin air thing. Mm-hmm. Like you're at your computer, you're at your keyboard, you need to write an email to drum up some business, drum up some sales, communicate with your customers, prospects. What's the process? Like how do you go through that?
Well, in that case, first of all, if you're selling a conventional product, or let's say a service, let's say you're a life coach, your business is transformation. That's a lot easier because you can tell stories about your clients and your own journey. If you're selling wholesale drug urine cups, obviously you're not going to talk about how it's transforming the lives of the purchase buyer at Overlake Hospital.
Yeah, so let's go more kind of B2B, more like just regular. Jonathan is in industrial sales, so that's kind of his world. So because I think it's easier to kind of see how you could take that and apply it to life coaching or business marketing or anything like that.
Yeah,
so let's go the more difficult route and
anything
talk about
that's a commodity. I mean, like you said, I mean, those cups, that's a commodity for the most part. People like, okay, what?
Well,
how do you how do you separate yourself from any other manufacturer out there that's doing that? Well,
because I mean, the first thought would be, well, how do I tell a story about a drug urine cup, right?
Well, that's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Pick up there.
Well, I was just going to say, in that case, you wouldn't be telling a story about your commodity. You would tell a story about yourself. You basically want people to open your emails because they find you a cool or entertaining person. That's the whole goal of emails. You want to establish that bond so that they go, hey, when I get a message, when I get an email from Jonathan or Sean, I'm going to open that email. And not just because his last name happens to be McCool. But so you can tell stories about yourself so that you become a character of sorts. And then that you kind of slide in the slide, you go in the side door that way. And Another way is if your commodity, I don't care how boring you think your commodity is, show us how the sausage is made. You know, you guys are both familiar with the story of Schlitz back in the early 1900s, where they were the first, they went from what, 18th to 4th place in the beer market because they just started telling people how the beer was brewed. And all the other brewers were like, what are you talking about? This is, everybody does this. It's
everybody,
boring. It's not boring to everybody else. You describe those dripping vats and the glass coolers, and all of a sudden it's fascinating. So almost any product can be made fascinating. I had one of my customers sells welcome mats from like Indonesia or something. And then he showed me pictures of the factory that makes them. And they were kind of cool to look at. You could tell a story about that, about how a product is made. So you don't necessarily have to make it about how, you know, if you're selling coffee mugs, you're not going to tell a story about how a coffee mug changed somebody's life. It's not going to resonate.
And I think there's a lot of people that would argue that point. I mean, yeah. I guess it's more the coffee than the coffee mug, but yeah, that's a good point. So you can either talk about kind of things that are just going on. So I think where people struggle with this, Bill, is the segue. Like, how do you, like, you've got a story and knowing how do I get from here to my product without it being weird, right? I mean, I've got my answers for that, but I'm curious. Like, I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, and yeah, I'm curious to hear your take on that. And would you agree with that?
I would. I'd actually be interested to hear your take on it, because I don't have a lot to say, but I know the first thing you want to do is, sometimes you can make a quick segue, but many times you can't. If you make it too quick, it's going to sound abrupt and weird.
Yeah.
And so that's the first rule of a segue, is don't just slide too quickly into it. Sometimes it takes some finessing. It's hard for me to think of an example off the top of my head, but it's just, a lot of this, as you know, copywriting is maybe just as much as an art as a science. So I think I probably have a knack for segues and transitions, so it might be hard for me to explain, but that's the first thing I would say, is that don't try and force it, and don't try and do it too quickly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd probably add that I think they get easier the more often you do them.
Yeah.
And I think you start to see, and same with writing stories, right? The more you write stories, the easier it is to spot stories out and about and around you. And the easier you do, the more you do those, the more you can segue anything to anything. Like, it's just, it's kind of like when you hear newscasters and some sports commentators, they're really good at segues. Like, that's part of the kind of part of the job, right? They got to transition from a fiery bus crash with school children on it to, like, the weather, like all those little transitions. Some of them are cheesy, but the fact is they do them, and some of them are smooth, some of them aren't. But the fact is, I think the more you do it, the easier it gets. One of my favorite ways to do it, and you can't use this all the time, but if you really get stuck, you just say, this is where I need a fancy, transition statement to talk about my product, and I don't have one today. So I'm just going to tell you about my product.
That's good. I like that.
And that's what I use, like, if I get just completely stuck. But yeah, I agree. Like, going back to what you said something earlier, we've said this 100 times on the show, and I keep repeating it because I want people to get it. I think it was Dan Kennedy. I've got a sheet from Dan Kennedy, one of his 3-ring binders with, 15th generation photocopy. So I think this is the quote based on what I can read from the photocopy. He says, people really only want 2 things. They want to be either entertained and encouraged that their current worldview is correct. And if you can entertain them or agree with their current worldview, not change it, agree with it, support it, reinforce it, you got them. And they'll open and read anything that you send them. So, I think that's kind of the basis of the story. But then the segue, I think it's just practice. I really do. And I agree. It's a lot of art to it. So I think you have to read a lot. People need to get on your email list and read kind of what you do and how you do it. And other good copywriters, Ben Settle comes to mind. I was telling a friend of mine, I actually like your emails better than Ben Settle.
Yeah.
I know he's kind of your next state up neighbor. But like, I feel like yours are a little bit more everyday language, where Ben kind of gets out there sometimes with his with his his special language and all this other stuff that he does. It's a little too cute sometimes, a little too over the top. So that's my opinion.
He's definitely got his own thing going on.
Yeah.
One thing I do like about him is that he in fact, one of the next emails I'm going to be sending out is about the Hemingway app, because I have so many mixed feelings about it. And he's one of those guys that probably thumbs his nose at it, as I do in many ways. And he is not afraid of writing long sentences using multisyllabic words that the Hemingway app would probably, not like. But
I worked with Clayton Makepeace a few times. I was lucky enough to work with him a few times. I don't know if you're familiar with him. In the financial and health space and things like that. And one phrase he said that just really resonated with me was like, a tactic known is a tactic blown. So even using the Hemingway app and trying to hit third grade reading level and all that kind of stuff, at some point it becomes a tactic and you lose some of the art and the voice and the other things, because you're trying so hard to hit the tactic that you might go against your own principles or things like that.
That's such a great point. In fact, that comes to mind now every time I use ellipses to break up sentences.
Yeah.
And it just becomes, I know it's effective and I know you want people to keep scrolling. It does make it easier to read, but now when I see it, I'm jaded because I read copy all the time. It almost feels like Chinese water torture to me. I read a guy like Stefan Georgi, who I like a lot. And he really, he'll break up a single sentence sentences into like 4 different ellipses, broken lines. And at some point, if too many people start doing that, I'd be the kind of person to look for a way to go in a different direction.
Sure.
Yeah. You can go with dashes. You just do 3 dashes instead of dots. It's funny. In my role, one of the roles I have right now with kind of running an agency, I had to review some copywriters' work. And one of the guys like literally put, the entire lead, the first third of the document, he had an ellipse after every single sentence. And I was like, dude, you just can't, that's too much. That's beyond too much. Like, you just have to, I think the same thing can happen. You know how, I know I like to, you like to, my buddy Doberman Dan. I think you and he write a lot alike. I don't know if you know Doberman Dan.
I do. Yeah.
He and you, I think y'all write a lot alike, where you ask the reader questions and kind of play their side of the conversation for them. And even that, I think that's one of those things that also can get overdone if you overuse it. And it's just, it's always trying to balance this stuff and stick with the principle of, talking like a conversation. It's like sometimes you have a serious conversation with your friends. Sometimes you have a ridiculous conversation with your friends. Sometimes it's short and choppy, and sometimes it's in depth and longer. Like, to me, that's, again, go back to the art.
Yep. Anytime it starts seeming like copy to me, then my hackles get raised, the radar goes up. So to mix it up is a great idea. I don't want to fall into a format of where it's just so stylized that it becomes predictable.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've got somebody posted in one of the copywriting groups I'm in a really good example of short sentences, medium and long sentences, and how they kind of wove them all together and things like that. I'll have to find that and send it to you, but it was really well done. Because they were kind of talking about the same thing, with I don't know if it was Hemingway app in particular, but the third grade writing, short sentences, which is not always the case. It doesn't always require short sentences. It requires clarity.
Yeah.
That's what Mark Ford talked a lot about. The FK score, all that is based about clarity, not necessarily about length and things like that. So
it doesn't like adverbs either.
Yeah. Neither does Stephen King. I think that's in his book on writing. He talks about getting rid of adverbs, and I agree, because they do tend to make your writing a little bit lazier.
Right. Yeah. What I want to do is, I'm reading this novel right now by Lucy Ellman. You guys aren't going to believe this if you never heard of this novel, but it's a 1,000-page novel consisting of one sentence.
Oh wow! Wasn't there like a famous Russian novel like that as well?
I'm not aware of it. Okay. Anyway, I want to feed that thing to the Hemingway app and just blow it up.
Yeah. AI just says, I quit. I'm out. That'd be like the scene from War Games at the end of War Games, the movie from the 80s, because we have to get an 80s reference on every show. So like when he tries to play tic-tac-toe against himself, the computer,
that's right.
And he's like, the only way to win is not to play. Like, I feel like that's what Hemingway app would do if you put that in there. It'd be like, I'm out.
Yeah.
One sentence, 1,000 pages. That's incredible.
One sentence. So, and her technique is every sentence. Well, they're almost like sentences broken up by semicolons.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The entire novel is, she says the fact that, and then she'll go on, the fact that, and you keep waiting for the payoff. And in a weird way, she makes it work because it's written in the voice of a Midwest housewife in Ohio who loves baking, but she's got real frustration. She goes on, the whole thing is basically a rant and a commentary on American life. It's compelling, even though and you have to stop reading in the middle of the sentence, obviously, because you're not going to finish a 1,000-page novel in a day or even a week.
Yeah.
But I think she was determined. I was so fascinated by it. I looked up interviews on her, and I think she was looking to kind of bust the form, kind of like we talked before. You don't want to fall into any kind of one form.
Yeah. I would love to take that into a 10th grade English class and make them diagram that sentence.
Yeah.
Or make the teacher diagram it. If I could, if I could go back to Miss Freeman and say, hey, Miss Freeman, here's a sentence for you to diagram. So
do you have a writer that you kind of pull from that it's one of your favorite to read? I mean, was it Stephen King? I mean, Grisham? I don't care who.
You know what? I'm a Jonathan Franzen fan. Richard Ford, Winterson, Saul Bellow. I liked back in the day.
So you read a lot of fiction then?
Yeah, not as much as I used to, but in my 20s and 30s, I read a lot of fiction.
Yeah. Okay. So where do you? I mean, if you're coaching someone who's writing emails or writing copy that really has a hard time developing stories just from everyday life and bringing those into their marketing copy or their emails. I mean, what do you tell them? Where do you start?
Well, where you start is training them how to notice them, because I guarantee you that anybody listening to this had at least 10 things happen to them yesterday that would have been a great story. I wrote a whole email on, I was loading the dishwasher, and I literally said out loud to myself as my wife was sitting on the couch, I said it under my breath. I said, I am so annoyed by how my wife loads the dishwasher. And that's a story right there. I mean, that's there's tributaries you could go off but there's like 10 things that happen to somebody every day that could make for a story, whether it's just a quick comment at Trader Joe's with the cashier who's having a bad day, and you said, like, my pet phrase that I use is like, boy, it never stops, does it? And then she looks at you like, oh my God, you acknowledged how I feel. Nobody ever does that. Thank you. That's a story right there. I was in a store once where a guy refused to take off his mask. And this employee, she was a woman in her 60s, you could tell she had a bad day. She struggled with this guy. She had to get security. And, that's a story. There's just, anyway, so I have a little system where I have a spreadsheet. And at the end of every day, I take 5 minutes and I think back on my day and I'm like, what's the most story-worthy moment from this day? Is there anything there? Mm-hmm. And if you train yourself to do this for a while, and it can only take 5 minutes a day, after a while, you'll get better at recognizing stories that happen during the day.
Sure.
So that's where you start. But another part of the equation is getting over the fear of putting that in an email. And honestly, I'm used to writing for clients, and now I'm writing for myself now. So when I sat down to write that email about loading the dishwasher and being annoyed at my wife, who's the sweetest person in the world, and the dishwasher is not an issue, but in that moment, I sure was annoyed. I had to get over a little bit of a fear of putting myself out there as somebody who's writing an email about his wife. I mean, that's not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah, I think a good example of this, depending on how you grew up, pastors, I think, do this really well.
Yep.
Right. They pull little stories from their life. I think they do that really well. But But I'm curious, Bill, because this is something I've struggled with. Hold on, I think I'm lagging. Yeah. So I was saying, how do you do that for clients? Like, so would you use like the dishwasher story for a client if you're writing for clients? Like, it seems like it's harder to, or maybe I'm just putting up a false barrier here, creating a problem where there's not one. How do you do that for clients? Because you're not in their day-to-day life.
Great question. My answer to that is you find the right client that's willing to do that. And I did have a client, one of my longest running clients. He was perfect for that because he was an open book. And I told him, I said, hey, just call my voicemail and just anything during the day, just leave a 2 to 5 minute to 10-minute voicemail on my phone, as long as it'll take, and I'll turn that into a story. And he didn't care what I used. So, if you have a client that's up for that, it's not hard to do. So one of them he was in Costco and he saw something, and it had to do, this guy was a fitness trainer, and he saw something about, something ingredients on a package or something, and he had an observation about it, and something else happened in the store. So if you're writing for clients, a lot of clients are not going to be on board for it. And I understand that and respect that.
But if they are, you basically have a process where you say, hey, when you see something, you start training them on, hey, when you notice this, send it to me. Okay. So that's kind of it.
And I try and make it as easy as possible. If they want to just type out an email or just leave it's very easy for people to call somebody's voicemail and just ramble on. And then I can make sense out of it. That's the way I found that's probably the easiest.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've had a client in the past. It was an industrial supplier, and had a pretty good relationship with them, and I did some similar things with them. And some of my best performing emails for them were very story based. The other thing that did is I used this. There's a service called Goldilocks.com that has like all the national holidays and the daily holidays and the weekly holidays, like the stupid stuff, like National Ice Cream Day, whatever. And I would go through there. I have a whole kind of checklist that I use to spread. It's not a spreadsheet. It's more of a 2-column. You kind of come to the cross and you figure out like what's trending on Twitter and what's a counterpoint to that. And I kind of go to the, where those two cross, and that's what I write about that day. Little matrix, I call it. But yeah, with clients, it's like it's just basically, hey, send me kind of stuff you see, and you start training them to give you what you need, and then you can flesh it out from there.
Yeah.
Like you just need the seed of the idea, right? You don't need the whole blown out email.
Right. But you can also feed them the seeds of the idea. I'll give you an example with the fitness guy. I'm a sports fan, and I was watching Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens, and he was doing a press conference, and he was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Nobody cares," in huge letters. "Nobody cares. Work harder." And that slogan fit exactly with my client. And so I texted him the photo. I go, "Give me your commentary on this. Just riff on this for 2 minutes. Call my voicemail."
Yeah.
And so you can feed your client things that you see, and they might jog their memory of a story, or they just might want to go off on it, and you can turn that into an email.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. That's a great way to, just help your client, help you. And then sometimes they're going to give you something that spurs 2 or 3 or 4 other emails.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about kind of the structure of the email, because it's interesting what you said in this one that you sent today, that you don't have to tell a full story. In fact, you don't want to tell a full story. Kind of go into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, when you read a good novel, or you watch a great movie, the arc, the hero's journey arc, or whatever you want to call it, you close the last page of the novel, or you watch the closing credits scroll in a movie, and you get a feeling of resolution. You're satisfied. You're satiated. Well, when you think about it, if you're sending emails to your list, you don't want that. You don't want them to feel resolved. You want them to take an action. You want a CTA. Right. So it's kind of a misnomer when people think, oh, story-based emails. I want a character. I want conflict. I want a climax. I want to resolve it. And boy, what a great story. Well, you don't really want that in emails. You want to instead, like we talked about before, you want them to bond with you. You want them to see you as a likable character that you open their emails. But you also want to, just get them to, I lost my train of thought there.
It's basically, you said let's see, we were talking about just not doing the full story, just part of the story. While you're thinking about it, because it'll come back if you don't try to think.
Must be the beer.
So while you're thinking about it, I'll say something I was thinking about that you could use for your thing. I was like, what would if I were going to title this method something, if Bill asked me what I would title it, I was thinking today after I read this email from you, I was like, so it's not a 3-act play, right? It's more like a 1.5-act play. So it's almost like the 1.5-act email method.
Yeah, what you're trying to do is just stimulate an emotional reaction in them. So let's say, I can't think of an example now, but if there's something they want in their life that your product solves, you want to stimulate that desire or hope they have and tell a story around that. And it may involve the solution, but you still want to tell it in a way that inspires them to take the next action.
I love that. I mean, Eugene Schwartz talks about that in his book, Breakthrough Advertising, right? It's like, you don't create the desire, you link your product to the existing desire.
Yeah, you can't force anybody to desire anything or force them into anything. You just want to rekindle what's already burning in there.
Absolutely.
And right. The story is the entryway into that.
Yeah. And then you just segue, oh, by the way, this solves it. Yeah. Yep. And I think that's a good way to look at it. And again, that transition is something I think you have to practice and things like that. So, but I think that's a good thing, because I think sometimes the idea of a whole story could be a little intimidating. And it's really just like a story jumping off point. It's almost like a car chase scene in an action movie, or the opening, kind of murder scene if it's a mystery. Like, it's just enough to hook people and want to know how this ends.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because in many cases, my story-based emails aren't even telling a whole story. You're just using storytelling elements. It could be just a few lines of dialogue. You're not setting the scene. You're not building up characters. You're not creating a conflict. Even if you just use dialogue, like me muttering under my breath as I'm loading the dishwasher, that feels like a story right there. And that's enough. You don't need to tell a whole story, because even just using story elements, whether it's a telling detail or some dialogue, that's going to separate you from people that are just selling promotional emails where they're not doing any even storytelling elements at all. So that's another thing you can disabuse people of, is that you have to tell a whole story. Not only do you not want to, but to make it effective, you can just use different elements, and that's going to help.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I mean, I've used some of this in B2B, and I think it works in B2B even better than it does in consumer. Because it's so rare there. I mean, it's pretty rare in, B2C as well, but in B2B, like I wrote one probably a month or two ago for a client who sells granite countertops, right? They sell and I told a story about, they have all these remnant samples from when they cut countertops, and then they have like some leftover pieces and stuff like that are about the right size for bathrooms, but not big enough for kitchens. And we just kind of told a story, and like, they were walking through the yard, they have all these leftover pieces, and they were like, what do we do with these? And hey, and I've used that same basic story frame of like, oh, I was walking around, I'm the owner, and I was walking around the warehouse, the yard, the whatever. And every time I've used that, it's done amazingly well. Like, well,
think about what a breath of fresh air it is compared to the white papers they're getting in, or a bullet list of all the features.
Yeah.
They're just stoked to read this actual story, or something that feels like a story.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's with the cashier example, it's like they can relate to that. If they've had a business, they've got this extra stuff that's left over from doing this and that. A lot of people can resonate with that, so, and it just feels more authentic, right? It's like, hey, I've got a good friend of mine who talks about, I think he got it from Gary Vee. It's like document your journey. Don't like sell it. Like, just document what's going on in your life. That's what like people get into. They like to, and I think you can do the same thing with your story-based emails. I mean, that's basically what you're doing with the dishwasher story, right? You're like, hey, this is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Why are reality shows so compelling for so many people? Because you're just along for the ride. And it could be the most mundane things they're doing. It could be them arguing in the kitchen, but you're riveted because you're a fly on the wall eavesdropping. And so, if you're writing emails and you're letting people be the fly on the wall in your house, people love that.
Yeah. I mean, who would have ever thought House Hunters on HGTV would be like the mega hit that it is?
Yeah.
And like, you can't stop watching.
And it's
like
not,
there's
not
nothing.
Houses.
Yeah. There's nothing in it for you. The houses are half the time not something you would ever consider buying. But there's something about the relatability of going on that journey that people are like, they just can't look away. And then there's just the open loop of which one are they going to choose, right?
Yeah. Right. My wife watches that show, American Pickers. Are you familiar with that show?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not even into a lot of the things these guys collect, but I just love the interaction of that guy. He's so likable, and he's negotiating deals and just the most mundane things, the way people are standing next to each other, the body language, you're just again, a fly on the wall, and you can't stop watching it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great example. Just, I mean, this stuff is everywhere. It's like, I mean, you could write an email literally. If you were listening to this show, you could write an email about how absurd it is that people like House Hunters.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, so, and I think the thing is it does take practice. Like it takes, when you were talking about the 10 examples in a day, I was like, when you first said that, I was like, that's a big promise to be able to, the 10 examples a day. Like, I don't know about that. But the more I think about it, the more I was like, yeah, but I think it's practice. It's waking up and noticing and not just going through your day, but actually making some notes. I was reminded of Taylor Swift. I heard a story about the way she writes her songs. Is she just takes her iPhone and she has a notes tab in her iPhone that is just for song lyric ideas. Like, it's not even the song lyrics. It's literally one line. She'll see it like a huge oak tree out the bus window. So she'll just write oak tree out bus window. And that's it. Puts it away, never thinks about it again until it's songwriting day. But then it's the day to write songs, and she opens up that tab and she just starts putting pieces together or just expanding the idea or whatever. So I think if one way you could put this into practice is when you have the conversation with the cashier, you just whip out your iPhone. Sure. When you get back to the car, put it in the notes tab, email story ideas, boom. And
yeah, I think that's a big part of it, because so many people just go through their everyday lives and they're not recording the conversations, or they're not.
Yeah, you got to capture it.
Well, exactly. They're not journaling at the end of the day, or like you said, opening up a spreadsheet, or just, jotting these things down. They just kind of flow through their life and they don't think about it anymore. But
yeah, we're all on autopilot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, something happened earlier in this interview. There's a story right there. I completely got flummoxed and lost my train of thought. And Sean came in, recognized it, kind of saved it. That's an email that I might write someday.
Sure.
And that's one thing that happened, and there's probably 8 other things that happened. So it's just a matter of recognizing them in the moment. I love the example of Taylor Swift, because all it takes is a few words. To just capture that moment, because you'll remember everything else around it just with those few words.
But if you don't capture it, that idea is gone forever.
That's right. That's right. Imagine if you had a file of those moments, say from 20 years ago. And I'm somebody who, from say age 21 to about 42, I kept a journal almost every day. And I have a stack in here. They're this high. And when I go back through them, guys, I read the most mundane thing that no way I would have remembered, but it brings in a whole constellation of related memories that I think when I'm 85 sitting in my rocking chair, I'm going to like reading, because they would have been lost forever.
That's fantastic. So
if you get in a habit of doing this, of capturing those memories now, it's just a valuable thing to do.
What do you think about, like, as writers, like writing prompt type books? Do you think that's valuable to help with this process? Or
I do. In fact, in my course, I have about 150 questions to jog your memory. Like, one that comes to mind is, what was the view from your childhood bedroom window? And you think about that, and you think about the view you saw, probably 10 related memories come rushing in. Yeah. And, when was your first kiss is a common one. So there's a lot of kinds of questions you can jog your memory on. So I have a thing in my course. It's a memory prompter to help people come up with these stories, because people too easily dismiss that they've lived a full life and that there's all kinds of memories there, but it's just, you just think of it as your life, but there's a lot of stuff there and it's all usable.
So I heard this quote today from Rich Sheffrin, who's been on the show, and just love his work. And he said today, it's just like hit me like a ton of bricks, especially probably because I was thinking about this podcast. But he said the most personal things in your life that you don't really want to talk about are also the most common, widespread issues in humanity.
Yeah, so, I don't know if I heard that from Rich, but I've heard that, and it's, what is that phrase? It's the most, there's a famous quote. We go to Goodreads and look it up. It's basically the most common things in life are the most profound.
Yeah, same idea. It's like, so the fact that, like, I mean, comics are a great example, right? I took a stand-up comedy class about 3 years ago, did a set in a bar and hold the bit, loved it. I need to do that again when bars really open again. But they have formulas. Like when I went to the class, I was like, oh man, this is all art. Like you just have to have a knack for it and things like that. But then they started breaking down the formula, and it's basically, it's a mind map, right? So you put a topic in the middle, and maybe we should interview a stand-up comic, Jonathan, put that out on Harrow. But so you basically start with a topic in the middle, like kids or teenagers. Let's go with teenagers. It's a little more specific than kids, right? So teenagers, and then off that, they'll put like weird. There's like 4 key words that they started with. I don't remember. I have to look at my notes, but like 4 different directions that you could go with that. You know, weird, frustrating, something else, and something else. And then you just kind of build off of those, like, and it starts to prompt your memories. Because it's, even back in my sales days when I was in home, one of the greatest referral techniques that I ever learned was people often ask for referrals, and they'll say, hey, who else do you know that could use something like this? You know, just basic. Right. And people's brains can't process that much information because they know 50 to 100 to 200 people, right?
Sure.
But if you say who in your Sunday school class could benefit from something like that, immediately it narrows down the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
Who at the last family reunion that you were at could use, you know, what we do. That was one technique. So you narrow down for them. And I think that's kind of what your prompts do, right? They narrow down a time in your life that then triggers more clarity. Because otherwise your brain's trying to sort an entire lifetime or an entire whatever.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And isn't Jerry Seinfeld's entire career based on ordinary moments?
I think most comedians are.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole show was based off of
nothing,
ordinary stuff. Yeah. Nothing, basically. Yeah. It's a show about nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and even most great sitcoms. I mean, Friends. I mean, they're sitting in a coffee shop talking about dating. Like, there's nothing new about that, right? It's just, they're just going through life. Yeah. So it's the ordinary stuff is what makes it relatable. So I think people need to. It's easy to dismiss that stuff, especially in an Instagram world where it's like you have to hike the Himalayas with a chimpanzee on your back while wearing, you know, $300 designer, you know, hiking shorts and whole LL Bean get up or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact is, like, getting pissed off about the way your wife does the dishwasher is much more relatable.
Sure.
Than the first, than hiking the Himalayas. Most people have never done that, and they never will, and they don't expect that they ever will.
Yeah.
They might want to, but they can't actually feel it in their gut when you talk about it. They can definitely feel the annoying of their wife in their gut.
Yeah.
Hope my wife's not listening right now. I said that with a lot of passion.
A little too much.
Yeah. It's just more real to people.
That's interesting too, though. B2B, it's real uncomfortable for people in B2B business to get that personal. And so, it's a little different when you're writing to B2C, your consumer audience, but when you're writing to corporate, emails, and I find this, because I'm in that field, exposing like the everyday, the mundane everydays of life and turning those into stories, it almost makes you feel in some parts vulnerable to some degree. But so there's a challenge in, I think, getting over that, when it comes to, B2B marketing.
Yeah. I think in those cases, not to be pessimistic, but the only way to maybe sway a person into this type of marketing is to make them do a split test and show them that revenue goes up if you get a little more personal. It's uncomfortable because I know the crowd you're talking about. It's really hard to get. It was hard for me to open up, and I'm kind of an open book. I didn't want to expose my inner thoughts to thousands of people, but people love that, and so it can be tough, but
yeah, it's funny you say that, Jonathan, because what especially bigger B2B people do, what type of stuff that they do to get sales and things. They go on golfing trips together. They go on hunting trips together. They invite you to their box at a sporting event. Like, and that's all to try to relate and get away from business and be more common.
Exactly.
But then they're scared to write an email like that where they, talk about that kind of stuff, but they'll spend thousands of dollars to take you on a, big game hunting adventure or whatever.
Sure.
Well, there's something about it. I think what it is, Sean, is there's something about committing it to paper or an email that it's that extra step that just feels like they can't go there.
Right. I agree. I mean, I have a coaching business too. And that's the hardest part of it is just putting those things on and letting the world see it. Like, for instance, right now, I'll be 50 this month, coming up in March. And, there's a whole series of stories around that. My son is grown and he doesn't talk to us right now because he's on the other side politically than what we are. And it's created this divide in the house. And as a quote, life coach, how can I talk about that? My life's not together. My son doesn't talk to me. Like it's, it creates all this imposter syndrome and everything. But if I would talk about it more, people be like, oh my God, I totally get that.
Right.
But for some reason, there is that fear that people are going to judge you, think you don't have your act together, then you're going to be kicked out of the tribe, and the whole, all the weird fears that come up in our brains.
Yeah. But you're right that if you got it out there, you'd probably be astonished by the reaction you got.
Yeah. I mean, one of my friends who, he's kind of into coaching, but he would just start making these posts. And one day he made this post, and this has been 5 or 6 years ago. He made this post about hanging out with his ex-wife and her husband and their new kid. And he was holding the baby, and that was the picture. And he kind of told this story of how it was a terrible divorce, but now they're friends. And that literally launched his career online because that post went viral and completely changed his life. And, so people are desperate for that. They're desperate because they feel alone. If you don't share those little things, they're not going to know.
Not only that, but you brought up a great point about storytelling. The one reason that resonated, I would say, is because it showed a complex character. It showed two sides, like Tony Soprano. I mean, here's a hit guy, here's a hit man who did awful things that you rooted for.
Yeah.
I mean, how beautiful is that a screenwriter can do that. So when somebody shows different sides, we resonated because we know that's true.
Yeah. I think the another show recently, we've talked about this before, Jonathan, Cobra Kai. I don't know if you've watched that, Bill.
Yep.
Man, that is the most back and forth show where you're rooting for two different people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the retelling. It's the up to date or the current lives of the Karate Kid characters and the original Karate Kid. If you haven't seen it. So it's Daniel and John and what was his name? Johnny. So it's those two characters. Daniel's a big success because he won the tournament. Johnny is like out and living in, drinking and living in an apartment because he lost that tournament back, in the Karate Kid scene. But the way they write this story, like one episode you're pulling for Daniel, the next episode you hate him and you're pulling for Johnny, and like it's just the complexity of both of them is just absolutely probably the most well done. You usually have a key enemy or a key bad person in a series. This just flip flops back and forth.
Yeah, it pulls you like you're like
you don't know who to root
You're
for.
back and forth every episode.
Yeah, you see yourself you see yourself in both of them.
Yeah, it's compelling because that's real life.
Yeah.
Superman back in the day was, all great traits, and then you get to something like Breaking Bad, and you see a character that's just more full, because that's all of us.
Yeah. Well, that's another show right there in and of itself, which is probably my all-time favorite show.
Yeah. And that's what made
Marvel everyday life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Marvel outdoes DC Comics most of the time, because their characters are more complex.
Yeah.
And you see more angles. I mean, Thanos, he wants to destroy the world, but you kind of get it. Like, you're like,
right.
I see your point, buddy. I like, yeah, things are out of control. Maybe we should get rid of half the people. I don't know. So it's like you kind of get them, and they've got a little humor.
But those are superheroes, right? I mean, those are little. Right. I mean, like Walter White, that guy. Everybody can relate to a guy that's struggling. He's middle-aged guy. He's
an opportunity.
Yeah, sees an opportunity where he's going nowhere in life. Had all of these dreams and aspirations.
Yep.
And has found himself as like teaching science at a high school.
Right.
It's like.
And if you think that can't happen to you, then go watch and then tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So one thing, and then we'll wrap up, and people can find out more about you. But so that last chain of thought there, especially the Marvel part, they do humor really well. How do you work? Yeah. Do you use humor in a lot of your stuff, or do you kind of shy away from that? Because some people say it's really hard to pull off humor in copy. Other people say it's.
Yeah, I would say that's one of those things I hate to say is maybe more art than science, because a lot of people, you can't force funny. And I wrote an email about this probably before you got on the list, but there's a difference between being funny and witty. Like, I'm not a person who tells jokes. I'm pretty witty, but I don't like to tell jokes. So if it's not in your nature to be funny, I wouldn't try and force it, but you can find humor in everything.
Sure.
So I don't think I have a good answer for you, but I do know that people are entertained by funny and humor. Mm-hmm. So if you can do it, don't hold back.
Right.
And even if it's maybe corny, I wouldn't hold back if it's really you, because people will see through that.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's a good example. Just kind of letting your voice come out. Like,
yeah.
So like, I mean, one of the companies I work with, I'm kind of the witty guy on Slack. So I just put these dry comments in like throughout the day on Slack, and it's like, it's entertainment for everybody. And I know it's entertainment for everybody. And it's just enough to kind of break the monotony of the day and little things like that. That's just kind of a thing that I've picked up, like this kind of dry wit, that I have. And I can pull it off in writing. Not everybody can pull it off in writing. So you kind of need to know, can you pull it off in writing or not, I think. And it does, again, it takes practice. Like, it is.
Sure.
I can sit there for 3 or 4 minutes sometimes trying to rearrange just the right words to get the right effect. And you got to be fast on Slack, because otherwise it'll get buried and you'll lose the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you also have to know the moment.
Yeah. One thing I like to do is, if I can, I don't always get to do this, but if I write an email and then I sleep on it and look at it the next day, sometimes I can tell I either went too far, or I was just trying to delight myself too much, and it's not going to work for other people.
Sure.
But like I said, you got to be true to who you are. The guy that comes to mind is the father character in Modern Family.
Yes.
He's such a cornball. He's such a cornball, but it really works for him. It's endearing. So if he wrote emails in that sense, you would get it from him, but you wouldn't want to force it on somebody that's not them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Phil, right? Phil Dunphy.
Phil, yeah.
Yeah. It's like the ultimate dad joke guy, right? I mean, that's his character's the dad joke guy.
Yeah.
And then you got his father-in-law, who's too serious, B2B guy, like
closets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great example. Like, you got to own your thing. Each of those characters has something that makes them special, and that's why you watch the show.
Right.
Same with The Office or any of these other, shows. Like, every character has kind of their thing, and you have to know your voice and just go through your life with that voice and not be ashamed of it, I think, is kind of what I'm picking up from this.
Yeah.
Whew, man, that hour and 15 minutes flew by. So
the final thing I'll say about that is, when you own it like that, when you own your own style, it's hard to do, but you'll be amazed to find that a slice will resonate with that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Some won't, but as you know, Ben Settle writes about this a lot. And Andre Chaperon writes about this too. You want to repel people as much as attract them.
Yeah, absolutely.
If your own particular brand of weirdness repels some people, that's fine. You're not trying to please everybody.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a great reminder, and that's scary for I know it's scary for myself, scary for a lot of people. But when you do it, you see it, but you got to do it enough times to get over the fear part of it. I don't know if you ever totally get over the fear of it. I guess I haven't done enough to get completely over the fear. But yeah. So Bill, to wrap up here, how can people learn more about what you do? If they found this kind of interesting and want to give it a try, how can they learn more about your methods and what you're up to?
Yeah, well, the current project I have, it's storysalesmachine.com, just the way it sounds.
Okay.
And if people want to drop me an email, it's bill@storysalesmachine.com.
Okay. All right. There you go. Simple.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I've been checking out the course. So tell us real briefly, give us kind of a little brief summary of that course that you walk people through.
Yeah. Well, we talked earlier about that email is, probably the best ROI, probably the money that's being most left on the table. I decided to create a system that helps people re-engage their list, email their list with stories that are not hype-based, that are more story-based. So I created a system that allows them to find their own stories, gives them a way to email their list in a compelling way that keeps them engaged. And that's basically it. It's kind of turns it into a system where you mine your own stories, come up with a system to get the email out there and go from there.
And you have templates. So just say you have templates, because that'll sell twice as much if you just say it.
People do love the templates, and I spend a lot of time on those. I also have a collection of 50 done for you stories. If you don't want to, we've talked a lot here about creating your own stories. I created a collection of 50 done for you stories that you can drop in your emails, just copy and paste them and make a segue and a transition. Sure. And that document also has about 88 transitional phrases you can use to do that. So that's another way that I've tried to make it easier for people to use stories and emails.
That's awesome, man.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's cool, man. 50 drop-in stories. So 50 or 80? 50. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm sure some of those stories kind of like they'll spur like your own stories, that are like kind of, sometimes when we're kind of told I share a story and we can't think of anything, but then, you go to some of the stuff that you read out and you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly. I've had something similar like that happen in my own life. So that kind of helps me tell my own story. So
and I would challenge listeners to go back and listen to this whole podcast episode a second time with like a notepad or, notes tab on your phone. Because we gave a lot of hints and clues, and I'm sure that jogged stuff for people, but they probably didn't capture them. So that's the other thing. You got to capture this stuff. Like, I promise you, it's so hard. I mean, you've got a system, Bill, that your brain is kind of trained to kind of collect things through the day and then dump them at the end of the day. But until you get there, capture them as you go. Yeah. And then also maybe do a recap at the end of the day. Everybody talks about morning routines, but I'm bigger on like end of day routines personally.
Sure.
That's a whole nother episode right there, Jonathan. So there's two episodes right there. Stand-up comedy and
stand-up comedy.
I was just going to say the stand-up comedy. I want to hear that story because I'm just so fascinated by guys that can get up there and do that.
It's a lot more science than you would imagine. Like you still have to notice, but once you learn the formulas, it's easier to notice. And I think the same is true for your stuff, Bill. Like once you understand the frameworks, it's easier to notice things out in the wild and know what you need to capture and what not to. So
did you have a script or it all written down and memorized it, or did you just kind of have bullet points and riff, or how'd that go?
Yeah, I just I'll send you the video, but I had an index cards because the audience actually knew we were a class and we were doing this. So I just made that part of my act. I was like, I had a bunch of, I actually took a whole deck full of cards up there so it would be nice and thick. And I was like, yeah, I've got a few notes, and then I would turn it over. So I just used a couple of like to hit the main points and make sure I got things in the right order. Cause even the order of the jokes is scripted out. You do I think it's you do your second best joke first, your best joke last, your third kind of in the middle, and then you weave other stuff together.
Sure.
So if you've got a, 6 or 7 minute set, you lead with the second best, end with the first, third best is in the middle, and then your fourth, fifth, and sixth joke or so is kind of ties those three together. You try to find an arc that ties those three together, and that's your set, for a typical 6 to 10 minute set.
Yeah, I am fascinated by the whole science of funny, because it is a science.
It is. It's fascinating. So we'll definitely have to get that on there, because that's some of the best comics in the world, especially the higher echelon comics, are some of the most persuasive people in the world. If you look at, a lot of the night show people and things like that, they're persuading entire generations that this is the worldview, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who get their news from Colbert and these other night shows more than they do, whoever's on the nightly news.
Yeah.
So it can be comedy can be very persuasive as well.
Yeah, and just like with marketing, where the ultimate arbiter is whether people pull out their credit card sales, whether it worked or not. You might think it's a great piece of writing, but did people buy? Jerry Seinfeld likes to say, "There's only one true form of justice in this world. Did they laugh?"
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, it's kind of like in the gym. Like the weight doesn't care how tired you are, how motivated you are. Did you lift it or not? Like,
right?
Yeah.
There's no opinion. You either lifted it or you didn't.
Scoreboard.
Yep. So. All right,
Bill, thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. Again, we'll mention your website, storysalesmachine.com. That's the best way people can find out more about your course, learn about that. I tell you give away some incredible value, and your copy's spot on this page. Yeah. So enjoy reading that, but we'll be posting the link for our listeners, and thanks for the time today. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you guys. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
All
right. We're going to send you to the green room for a second. Sean and I are going to wrap up, and we'll bring you up for a second after, if you got a few minutes to hang tight.
Sure.
Good stuff, man. Enjoyed that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good stuff in that episode. You got to listen to that one twice at least.
Yeah. That's one that you can, you need to be jotting down some notes. Yeah, if you'll notice, I was like, my head was down. I was taking quite a few notes.
Yeah,
I was filling my notebook up. So
yeah, so I would recommend too that first you buy Bill's course. Second, and we're not doing an affiliate program or anything. It's just a course I'd recommend.
Yep.
At the very least, get on his email list. You can learn a lot just kind of going through that and seeing how it's done, and actually experiencing it for yourself and how you feel when he tells the stories.
Right.
So definitely go for that. Well, John, I'll let you wrap up.
All right, guys, as always, you can find us persuasionbythepint.com. You can find us on all of your podcast platforms. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See ya.
All right.